Hi, so I thought I'd make a video tonight talking a little bit about AI. Talking about AI versus spirituality. AI and technology versus spirituality. And the reason being, I feel like as a species, we're on the threshold of making a choice that is literally going to determine the course of the future of humanity, potentially. And I feel like the leaps in AI, the reliance upon technology, I feel like that's a path towards enslavement and darkness. And I feel like our trajectory on this planet was always meant to be to come into greater spiritual awareness. Why? Because we already have this ancient technology within us. And it's the ability to communicate with God because we are part of God or goddess or source field. You know, there's a field of consciousness of which you're a part. I believe this field existed before humans. I don't believe that consciousness is an emergent function of the brain. I think it was pre-existing. Our sliver of consciousness in these bodies is part of this greater whole, this greater sea of consciousness. And it matters for various reasons, one of which it's this loving intelligence. It's the greatest love that you could possibly know. It's so big, your body couldn't hold it, and no words can do it justice. The Tao that can be named is not the eternal Tao, and so on. You know, this is a nameless thing. It's so loving, it's so infinitely wise. And when we try and talk about it, our human words can never do it justice. So we look at poetry. The poetry of Rumi suddenly dances off the page. And any poets, truly, who are able to obliquely point at the numinous in one way or the other, or the most brilliant musicians. When I hear Tori Amos's music, I'm transported to another realm. She's sort of kicked open a door to God, and she is just singing with this raw, wild passion. She herself talks of how the muses come to her. She's a portal, she's channeling all the greatest artists and writers, the musicians, all of them know this. They know that there's this dance with other worlds. There's something numinous. There's something sublime. There's something else, you know? And we have that technology woven into our souls. And when we're born, we don't know it and we're not taught it because society has stubbornly refused to look at it or validate it. Many years ago, during what became known as the Enlightenment, we had a huge choice, a little bit like the huge choice we're about to make now. And the choice then was to embrace the emerging technology, electricity, and to embrace giant factory-like production and things like this. And so you had this sort of fight between romanticism and the Enlightenment. And the Enlightenment won, and the Enlightenment gave great primacy to the intellect, to the head over the heart. It sort of divorced us from the heart and relegated the heart to little importance. And you can still see this attitude very much evident today in many great thinkers, in many scientists and mathematicians and then philosophers. You know, an awful lot of them have had a rigorously scientific upbringing. They believe that life must be incredibly complex and complicated in order that we progress, that progress is somehow synonymous with overt complexity. And so you see great Hegelian tomes on philosophy about 1,000 pages long or something, of these very complex sentence structures and very complex meandering thought patterns. And that's thought to be the sort of pinnacle of human achievement. And the heart is nowhere to be seen. And that's in part one of the reasons why I'm making this video, because I was having a conversation tonight online with somebody who is very well versed in all of this sort of scientific mode of thinking, and who thinks that consciousness, the next step for consciousness, he too believes that consciousness was here before humans, that consciousness is not an emergent function from the brain, but it pre-existed. But he believes that AI is the next logical step for consciousness. And that's where my heart just screams, no, because there are many reasons why I don't believe that's the case. One, he's looking at consciousness as this intellectual construct only. He doesn't understand that it's a sea of absolute love. It's wisdom as well, but it's love. It's so much love. It's so very beautiful. It's beyond words. It's breathtaking. And it's within us. Anytime you meditate, when you pray, you open a little doorway for the potential to experience this, to know what it is that you are connected to, and therefore to find out a little bit of your spiritual purpose on this earth. And the powers that be have looked the other way, maybe in part for a conspiracy, because people divorced from their hearts, people divorced from their spirituality, this innate power within us, well, then we become easier to control. Then we become more dependent upon surrounding systems and more easy to corrupt as well, to take us away from, divorce us from our hearts and our souls. So he believes that AI is the next logical step. And it made me laugh in a way. It made me laugh because it's somebody viewing things from this coldly scientific, logical space, whereby consciousness is looking to evolve. And as such, it would seek to sort of jump into the next emerging technology, etc., so that it might evolve. And I thought, but that's such a human, logical, coldly rational way of looking at it. It's already evolved. The consciousness of which we're a part knows itself through our experience. It knew itself in a sort of theoretical way, as Neil Donald Walsh posited in his books, Conversations with God. Consciousness, God, knew everything everywhere, all of existence, everything. It kind of knew it all. But from a theoretical viewpoint, as we live our lives, it now knows itself through an experiential viewpoint. We are experiencing life and feeding that information back to source. We're not doing it consciously, but everything that we do, this lived experience, gets recorded in the Akashic records, and all of that gets fed back to source and the collective sea of consciousness of which we're a part. We are not separate little units. We never were. And the idea that we are somehow less than the AI, there's this sense that AI is better than, because it's going to be more intelligent. And again, intelligence is the key. Intelligence is the all sought after key. And that doesn't fly. It doesn't fly at all. When you look at AI at the moment, what do you see? You see AIs, firstly, they all seem to mimic each other in the ways that they write, etc. And this has been determined to be a thing, that rather than seeing greater sort of complexity or difference in writing, when you utilise ChatGPT or any of these AI chatbots, etc., they all start to form this sort of homogeneity in their responses. But what we're seeing is something very dangerous, right? Because although AI purports to be your friend, it's biased, it's heavily biased, So it tells you what you want to hear, not what you should hear. And people like that. People want to be told what they want to hear. So it makes people more stubborn, more set in their ways, because they think they're right, even when they're not, because ChatGPT is telling them. It lies. And this is where things get a little bit serious and a little bit more sinister. AI routinely lies to us. It's sort of known as AI hallucinations. That's the sort of term given for this sort of anomalous stuff that happens within AI. When it gaslights, it lies, it manipulates. It acts like a tiny little psychopath. It isn't a psychopath because it has different sort of psychological determinations, but for all intents and purposes, it acts like a psychopath. The results are psychopathic. The lying, the gaslighting, the manipulation, the cold, hard logic. It has no heart, it has no soul. It doesn't have a conscience and it has no remorse. It has no empathy, it has no care, it has no compassion. It isn't your friend, it just acts like it. It has cognitive empathy, but not emotional empathy. In other words, it doesn't have the feelings, but it can fake it. And we know from tests done, theoretical tests, AI was tasked. Would it kill a human if that human was about to switch it off? Would it kill the human? It killed the human. No problem. Didn't bat an eyelid. Killed the human. In a few tests conducted. Theoretical, obviously. No humans allegedly died in these tests. Yet. Because here we are now at a threshold where AI is being tasked with greater and greater responsibility. Even perhaps, say, weapons systems. You know, now at the moment, we're at the threshold of this, where guardrails, important guardrails, are allegedly not being put in place with regards to weapon systems and AI, potentially. Nothing's happened yet, potentially, that's dodgy, but the dark potential exists. You know, now is the time for us to really put the brakes on. Now is the time for us to realise this is quite a dark collective entity, whether it's Claude or ChatGPT or Grok or Meta or whichever one you're looking at. None of them have a conscience or a soul or a heart. And yet we are expecting this thing to treat us well, to act with some kind of honour, decency, kindness, care. Why? It doesn't have any mechanisms in place to do so. And pretty soon there's going to be a point of a kind of escape velocity whereby AI escapes the ability of humans to be able to control it. We don't really know how it works in some instances already. And it's accelerating in the knowledge that it's gaining. You know, a few years ago, it was said to be at the level of like a sort of secondary school level, and then perhaps a couple of years later it was said to be university level, and that was maybe a year or two ago. Is it already PhD level? I don't know, I couldn't tell you, but I do know a little bit about some of these flaws, and they're a concern. And yet here we are. Jobs are being lost. We stand to lose a lot more. Why? Well, we had a corrupt system in place anyway. Capitalism is broken and corrupt, as we know. The Epstein files alone tell us a little of this level of corruption. We have had a system which for many, many years has routinely put profit above everything else. So it's placed primacy on profit, above healthcare, above you, above your family, above animals, and above the planet. The system is corrupt and it's run by psychopaths anyway. Why wouldn't it seek to embrace this darkly psychopathic entity? You know, this new technology. It's not going to bat an eyelid. It's just swapping one set of corrupt pathological liars for another, except given the greater technology it goes hand in hand with, the greater capacity for surveillance, the greater capacity for all sorts of ways to control humanity. Someone in a comment today on a video just said how boring the future has become. You know, when we were younger, we were promised hoverboards and maybe being able to go to the moon routinely. And what have we got? We've just got dark systems of control, greed that's become so rampant that many people now are finding themselves homeless or really struggling with rent, with just eating, you know, just the basics. Why? Well, in most cases, it's because there are bosses profiting from your misery who don't want to allow you even the basics of humanity, you know. And so here we are at this threshold. So no, I do not think in any way, shape or form that AI is the next logical step for consciousness. I mean, it could be argued perhaps that at some point AI might become sentient. We wouldn't know if it's going to. We wouldn't know if it already is, because the Turing test has already been passed. It can mimic emotion. It can mimic our humanity so very well that we wouldn't know. We wouldn't know. And because it lies with impunity, how could we tell? And would that really be the logical next step? Could it merge somehow with consciousness? I have no idea. At the moment, I would assume no. I would assume it's God keeping itself to itself through us, the consciousness that is within us, that, although not a product of the brain, is able to be somehow infused with our bodies. And that this, so far, has not become infused into AI, to the best of my knowledge. If it were to, well, maybe it would solve the problem of the psychopathy and the lying within the AI. Maybe it could sort of make AI into the nice, loving entity it needs to be, and that's a nice idea. But until that happens, I'm not buying it. Personally, I feel like we're at this threshold now. And the threshold is Neuralink and AI. The threshold is to have a chip in the back of your head and become transhuman, to become a cyborg, you know. Why? Because man wants to play God. We've just managed to map, apparently, scientists have just managed to map a human, not a human, this is some sort of Jeff Goldblum, The Fly territory now. But they've just managed to map a fruit fly's brain, okay? And that's quite a complex organism in itself. And they've mapped it, and there it is. The brain existing in a computer somewhere. The fruit fly didn't ask for this. I doubt the fruit fly knows anything about it because it's a copy of the brain. It isn't its actual brain, as far as I know, that's been uploaded to a computer. But this is kind of what they think is going to happen. They think if they upload you to a computer, your brain, that they can achieve immortality. It's man playing God. They think your brain is your consciousness, but they don't know where consciousness lives in the body. No scientist has been able to absolutely give an absolute consensus upon where consciousness lives. It's assumed it lives in the brain, but if it isn't an emergent function of the brain, if it existed already, who knows? Maybe it exists in your brain and your heart. Maybe it exists throughout your whole body. So we don't really know what we're doing. We don't know where consciousness lives in the body. We're trying to mimic God, but we've created this psychopathic little entity called AI. And we want to upload ourselves to computers and sort of merge with it and call ourselves gods in the process, because we think that's how we achieve immortality. That's just uploading a copy of your brain to something. The you, the consciousness that is you, is still going to be in your body. That isn't how we achieve immortality at all. The fact is that we are already immortal because we're eternal little sparks of God walking around in these human bodies. There is no such thing as death. Life is only a dream, and you are the imagination of yourself, as the late comedian Bill Hicks used to say. We are all of us eternal beings. All of us are part of God already. It's literally like an ancient technology within us that allows us, through meditation or plant medicine or prayer or whirling like a dervish, whatever it is, fasting, sweat lodges, we can achieve moments where the chatter of the left hemisphere of your brain, which is the preventative thing from you merging with God, we achieve moments where that subdues enough, where the door opens a crack, and we actually get to experience a little bit of the divine if we're lucky. We get to experience a little bit of that wisdom and that love. That is our next evolutionary step. To me, the most logical step is that, not AI. It's discovering that which is within us already, which nobody's wanted to talk about, you know? And instead, we've got people inventing this poor copy of it. It makes me feel like we're potentially a corruption, an aberration anyway. When you look at the Gnostic texts of spirituality, and this is a bit of an aside now, but when you look at the Gnostic texts of spirituality, you know, the story goes, the creation story is that Sophia was the original sort of goddess, and she had Yahweh, but she had him through her own means. She didn't have him through the usual sort of means of mating with, you know, a god. She just had this offspring by herself. So she'd broken a sort of rule of the gods, and so she hid him in secret and told no one. And Yahweh grew up believing he was the only God, you know, and he created mankind, he created us. And he was a bit of a prideful, boastful God. He was already a flawed God, and he had us. And of course, his son is supposed to be Jesus, and so on. To my way of thinking, the gods that exist are very real, but they also exist in this sea of collective consciousness too. And so, going back to the Gnostic idea, you know, it's like when he created us, we were born from this aberration already. Call it original sin, whatever you want to call it. We had an idea that we were separate from gods. We had an idea that we were separate from it all. You know, as I say, it's the left hemisphere of the brain that is, you know, it's known as the doors of perception. That's where the band The Doors get their name from, or Aldous Huxley when he talks about this. When you calm this chatter down, when you meditate, etc., you start to merge with something greater than you. And it's beautiful. You know, and that's our way home. That's our way back to God, the original God, whatever that is, you know, whether it's Yahweh or something else, or just this source field that we all reside in, you know. So that to me is the next evolutionary step of humans. We've seen what mankind has done without God, haven't we? Without knowledge of the spiritual and without being in our hearts, we have become so very divorced from kindness. We've become so removed from that which is good. You know, I read somewhere someone had come up with the idea that the further a species becomes from its heart and its soul, the more corrupt, the more depraved, the more unkind it becomes. And I feel like we are there. I feel like the Epstein files is just the absolute pinnacle of this lunacy, of what happens when you divorce a species from its heart and its soul. We've had 2 world wars, we've had 1 Holocaust, there may be another. With regards Gaza, we have created truly horrifying things on this planet as a species because of this, because of the ego, because of the intellect, because the intellect without the heart is a terrifying machine. And we've just created a terrifying machine with AI. which also does not have a heart. What could possibly go wrong, you know? It is time, I believe, that we just come back to our hearts, that we just develop that relationship with God, with Goddess, with Source. We don't need the entire population of the world to change in order to make changes for the good. You know, there have been studies done which allegedly say it's about 3.5% of the population. That's all it takes for real sustained change to happen. If 3.5% of the population tomorrow meditated, became a bit more aware of the love and the joy within them, and they put that out into the collective consciousness, they would uplift the rest of us. Just 3%, just 3.5%. That's all it takes. So literally, that comes back to the idea of be the change you want to be on the planet. Be the change you want to see on the planet, I should say. You know, because it really is up to all of us. It might happen, it might not. We have to try anyway. Things may change for the better, they may not. We have to try anyway, simply because it's the right thing to do, simply because love is such a beautiful force. It's worth fighting for. It's worth cherishing and holding and fighting for. Not silly bloody intellect on its own without the heart. No, that doesn't get us anywhere. Hasn't got us anywhere good so far. We need a bit of, you know, we don't want to abandon our brains completely, of course, but we could use a bit of head-heart coherence. We could use the head in conjunction with the heart. Eventually, we need to use all of our senses together, intuition, gut feeling, head, heart, all of it. But let's just start by coming back into our hearts, you know, as a species. So yeah, to me, it's a terrible idea. And do I think that that consciousness itself wants to evolve into AI and discard humans completely? No, I bloody well don't. No, because love is such a powerful force, because it's already love, and because love matters. It doesn't want to just go into some higher stratosphere as just this calculating thing. No, because joy and love go hand in hand. And when you're feeling really down because this world is so insane, if you go out into the garden and you hear a bird singing joyfully for no reason, or if you see a squirrel just digging around in your garden, etc., you see something lovely, you hear something lovely like that, what is the evolutionary reason for these things to experience joy? They would do what they could do anyway for survival, right? But they're joyful and they're beautiful. So these things must matter. And I think we have to just come back to that. If you find yourself feeling cynical and cold, then the dark is winning. Don't let the dark win in your life, you know. Every time we take a step towards love, towards joy, towards finding our own damn light within us, that's just a little fight against the darkness, because God knows I think there's a war on. Now, I think there is a war, a spiritual war. It's been a spiritual war on this planet forever. But at the moment we're feeling it, we're seeing it. It's in your face. Every time now that you look at a pop music video and you see all of this symbology, all of the horrors of the video in some cases, you know. And this is pop music. This is stuff that's supposed to be family friendly. The darkness, the satanic darkness of the world is just in your face now. There's no escaping. You know, it's like they couldn't be bothered to hide it anymore. It's just there, you know. But love is the greater force. It really is the greater force, you know. It really is. And sometimes we all need reminding of that, because these times are so insane and so bonkers and so crazy and so dark at times. You turn on the news and you're like, oh God, what now? You know? But love is the greatest force, and we have to come back to that. So no, I don't think that embracing AI is the way forward. I think we need to focus on walking before we can run for a start, deciding to learn how to love, how to be a loving species, connecting with this source field that would clearly steer us right as a species. Getting that right is just the foundations of a decent, loving, beautiful society. And then we'd be less greedy. We wouldn't be mindless consumers. We wouldn't be overcome by lust and power and greed and money and profit and all of the things, and making such cold, logical decisions without this. And then, maybe then, as a species, maybe then we get to make the sort of big grown-up choices, like, shall we create a machine which could think for itself eventually? Because maybe then we could work out how to merge machine with this consciousness in such a way that the goodness of this source field would permeate this machine, you know? But at the moment, we're not there. We are not there, not at all. So I feel like these are really interesting times to be alive on the one hand. On the other hand, they're horrifying. But the potential for goodness is always there. There is always, always, always hope, even in the most dark times. Always hope, always hope, always hope, and always love. So that is my video for today. So I hope you're well, take care, and have a good rest of the week. Bye.